Hello, I'm Maciej Mikos and you're watching World Talks live from Warsaw. After 3 months of students' protests in Serbia, demonstrators seem as resolved to topple Aleksandar Vučić as they were right after the Novi Sad catastrophe, which saw 15 dead and sparked outrage across the Balkan country. Now, to discuss the recent situation in Serbia, we're joined by Magdalena Marta Baran, editor-in-chief of Liberty. Good evening. So the democratic process must be respected. We do not support those who undermine the rule of law or who forcibly take over government buildings. If you don't like a law or a leader, then work to change it, but don't use violence. Do you know who said these words on Serbia?
I would suggest that the president,
no,
probably.
That was Richard Grenell, U.S. Special Envoy for Missions. That's the first time that the new U.S. administration has commented on the current situation in Serbia. Now, how to interpret his words?
Since we observed the protests in Serbia, so from, as you said, already 3 months, and we observed a growing wave of protests, because at the very beginning it was just in Belgrade and Novi Sad, then Niš, then other smaller cities all over the country, with a huge protest in the New Year Eve, and the huge two protests, in fact, last Friday. Let's say that the source of the heart of the protest is based on the decentralized civil disobedience. So exactly the way when you, to explain civil disobedience, the moment when you know that you violate the law and you're aware of the consequences, but you think that the law is in fact against the society and it doesn't serve the human rights. And this is, or the society as such. And this is the situation right now in Serbia, when the so-called street accuses government of so many crimes, including the crime against society, including the crime against public security. In fact, those accusations appear also in government's accusations against the 11 people, including the former Ministry of of Transport and the former chief of the National Railway, as those responsible for the catastrophe. We need to remind probably that the catastrophe happens on the 1st of November 2024, and because of the fall down of a part of a made of concrete roof of the railway station in Novi Sad, just renovated, not in very transparent way, we can say. 15 people were killed, and exactly it started the wave of protest, but in fact the protests were since the very beginning to find justice for those who were killed, to find responsible for the catastrophe, but also to show the corruption in Serbia.
Precisely,
and many procedures.
What we call a fight for the rule of law. And it's quite surprising that the High Representative of the US portrays the protesters as those who act against the rule of law, when in fact all they want is the rule of law in Serbia. Now, Richard Grenell, the special envoy, also referred to some acts of violence. So were there some incidents of criminal nature during the protests?
At least some of those actions were considered to be the violations of law, including blocking the street, for example, including some accidents using cars but those are not, I would say, big deals. But blocking the streets, yes, and blocking also the public institutions by the protesters, public institutions that's supposed to be corrupted. And, you know, but since I hear it from the High Representative of the US, we should have in mind what Pete Hegseth had said at the front of the commission, saying when he was asked by John Reid, if I remember correctly, so Democratic senator, if you would be willing to use the army against protesters at the streets of US, and he said, yeah, this is if it would be the presidential decision, if it would be the violation of the rule of law, but well, we will see what the rule of law really means for Donald Trump and his administration.
Well, we know that Aleksandar Vučić can count on much support from the Kremlin, on support from some pro-Kremlin European leaders like Viktor Orban, for example. Now, could Donald Trump be joining this inglorious club, well, against the interests of the large part of the Serbian society and, of course, against the interests of the EU?
I'm not sure if he would take care about Serbia that much, especially right now. Maybe since we should have in mind that Serbian Progressive Party, so Vucic party, is still associated with European People's Party, so the EPP. So in fact, the ruling party, the most powerful party in the European Parliament. And they are rooted in a very, I would say, from ideological point of view, very complicated coalition of ideas, counting conservative part of the party, then central right on one side, but also neoliberal economy they still believe in. And yeah, the problem with the protests is that, in fact, no one from the EU would like to take the role of the negotiator between the president and the governing party and the street, because okay, we can say it's a partly opposition, but those are people, those are mainly citizens who just are ready to say, okay, that's enough. And the wave of protest, okay, we know this. We noted this wave of protest really high wave. But the protests in Serbia are present since 2016, and it was just a year before Vucic became a president. No, he was a president those days. It was the end of his first candidacy. He became a president in 2017. I'm sorry. But it was economical protest by farmers and teachers, protest against the, let's say, promotion of external.
So we see that a wave
partners.
of protests has rocked the country for many years now, and it's still at power. So what has to be done? You know, I'm looking from the perspective of protesters, of course, to replace the president.
Well, you know, his government has a really good first. He got used to, after years, he got used to ignore some protests, but those protests are not that easy to be ignored. They are really good in strike management. Shifting some moods into other problems, like a problem with Kosovo, for example, or in things really important for the young people, like a new government program for building apartments for the youth, so on, so on. And there is no political leader in this opposition really strong, even if right now the opposition started to say, okay, maybe we should form a temporary government, of a kind of government of the experts to solve those problems, because really the problems that was shown during the protest, including the lack of transparency of the political process. In fact, many of those problems are the problems that doesn't allow Serbia to join the European Union. They started the whole protest in 2009, but since 2012, so already 13 years, they are the country candidate, but they are not able to solve problems with, they does not recognize Kosovo, independence of Kosovo. They have problems with the International Criminal Court, so Hague, after the war. Also, but they have a really huge bureaucracy, huge corruption, and the corruption is in fact growing. And right now they have problems with autocracy, because Vucic already started to be called an autocrat. So that's why the problems with the European Union.
He also claims his country is being attacked from both inside and the outside. Now, who would be the outside actors attacking Serbia, in his mind?
Definitely Kosovo, because it's a well, one of those main problems that block the way to the European Union, and probably some European countries also, who recognize Vucic and his party as a supporter of Russia, supporter of Kremlin. Most of us probably, also at the university, we know a lot of Russian academics that simply cross the border of Serbia and live their really good life, continuing their academic career. But the same with the part of business. Some of the maybe not the highest oligarchs, but also Serbia was one of those directions to have a good life for Russians.
Well, it's no surprise that Serbia has good relations with Russia that has lasted for many decades now, if not centuries. The question, however, is, because we've only touched upon the subject, how strong is the support for Vucic, especially in the heart of the country? And I'm not talking about big cities, right? I'm not talking about students, of course, highly educated people. I'm talking about his hardcore voters.
When he was winning the election for the first time, presidential election, he had 60% support. But these days, Serbian people, we observe also in Serbia pretty high support for the European Union right now. And those are the research from 2023. They had only 33% people willing to join the European Union. So I'm not sure if about the real support for the president today. But since the protests are present all over the country, including smaller cities, since the protests are also present in independent media, and the part of the protest called the general strike that happened last Friday was visible in cultural institutions, in the shops, in independent media, of course, schools and universities, so on, so many smaller places where, in fact, the problem haven't got such a recognition yet. So I would be happy to see the research conducted in a month or two, because they would probably show the real support for Vucic right now.
Well, but we know, on the other hand, that the support for the students' movement under the emblem of red, bloody hand is growing. So there's something to observe in coming weeks and months. Magdalena, Marta, Baran, editor-in-chief of Liberté, was our guest tonight. Thank you.
Thank you and good night.
And thank you for watching, and stay with us for much more news and comments here on TVP World.